In this video, we'll explore the top 3 checkmates in the King's Gambit. Sharp, aggressive ideas that punish careless defense and end the game quickly. Let's dive in and see how to finish your opponent in style. The King's Gambit arises from the first moves, pawn to e4, pawn to e5, and then white continues with pawn to f4. This is indeed a somewhat risky opening because you are potentially exposing your own king by pushing that pawn forward. However, if you know what you are doing, it becomes even riskier for your opponent. In this video, we are going to explore real games played at high levels, up to Master and Grandmaster level, where black players with ratings of 2,500 or even 2,700 made critical mistakes and lost very badly against the King's Gambit. In the first example, we already have a black player rated 2,500. Let's see what happens in this position. After black captures with pawn takes f4, white plays knight to f3, immediately defending the key square on h4 so that black cannot deliver a check with the queen or any other piece. Black responds in the most principled way, pawn to g5 defending f4 pawn. It's a bold defensive idea, but as you'll see, it can easily backfire. Secondly, black is preparing to push pawn to g4, aiming to drive white's knight away from the square f3. After that, black plans to deliver the dangerous check with queen to h4. This idea is one of the reasons many players have stopped playing the King's Gambit altogether, because they fear getting caught in such sharp lines. However, there are reliable ways for white to handle this position effectively, and I am going to show you one of my favorites. The first line starts with white playing knight to c3. At first glance, this looks like a simple, normal developing move, but in reality, it sets a clever trap. Black usually continues with pawn to g4, attacking the knight. As white's knight retreats, black confidently plays queen to h4, bringing the queen out with check to white's king. At this moment, it looks like white is already in serious trouble. Moving the king forward would only expose it further, and white's king appears stuck while the other pieces remain undeveloped. But as we will see, things are not as simple as they seem. So, moving the king to e2 would be a bad idea for white, and playing pawn to g3 looks just as bad. After black plays pawn takes g3, white cannot recapture with the pawn because that would leave the rook on h1 undefended and lost. If white does not recapture, black still threatens to deliver a strong check on the next move, and it looks like white is about to lose completely. However, there is a hidden resource. White plays queen takes g4, counterattacking black's queen. This forces black to trade queens. After that, white reaches an endgame where white is ahead in development and the position is perfectly playable if black simply trades queens on g4. But black has a much sharper idea. Instead of trading queens right away, black plays pawn to g2 with a discovered check to white's king. Even though black temporarily sacrifices the queen, the plan is to win white's rook on h1 and eventually recover the queen as well. In this variation, it seems as if black has outsmarted white, gaining material and ending up with an extra rook, leading to a winning position for black. Everything looks fine for black, until white plays queen to h5. Suddenly, there is no real defense, and despite being a rook down, white is winning. Black's natural moves have walked into a hidden trap. Black might try knight to h6 to block, but after white plays pawn to d4 and captures the knight, queen takes f7 still happens with support from the knight on e5. In the actual game, black chose bishop to e7, preparing an escape square for the king, but even that could not stop white's attack. If white plays queen takes f7, it fails. Black's king escapes, and black wins with the extra rook. Instead, white plays knight takes f7, which still wins. Black replies with knight to f6, but white follows up with knight to d6, delivering a discovered double check. Black's king is forced to move. King to f7 loses immediately, so in the game, black chose king to d8. Then came white's final move, queen to e8, sacrificing the queen to finish with a beautiful checkmate. After white plays knight to f7, white is completely winning. It is an absolutely brutal variation. And once again, this line can work even against advanced level opponents, including strong club players or even masters. For now, let's return to white's traps. The next variation is just as entertaining and powerful. Once again, black plays along the main line. After pawn takes f4 and white plays knight to f3, black responds with pawn to g5. In this case, white plays bishop to c4, a classic idea from an old line, made famous by legendary masters such as Paul Morphy. Even today, bishop to c4 remains a deadly attacking weapon in the King's Gambit. What stands out here is how calmly white plays. After black pushes pawn to g4, white simply castles, letting black capture the knight on f3. White keeps developing with knight to c3, ignoring threats and inviting black to overextend. Black's most common reply is pawn takes g2, which looks strong but is actually a losing mistake. Instead of reacting directly, white strikes with bishop takes f7. White is already far ahead in development, while black's pieces are stuck. That gives white enough momentum to sacrifice material and launch a winning attack before black can defend. So, what is happening here? After white plays bishop takes f7, white forces black's king to move forward. Then white continues with rook takes f4. Now white is not just recapturing the pawn, but also creating a deadly attacking setup. At this point, what options does black have? If black's king tries to escape toward the center or queen side, white can simply bring the queen out, and it will lead to checkmate in just 1 or 2 moves. For example, it can be a clean checkmate along a file or rank, known as a linear checkmate. So escaping is not realistic for black. Let's look back. The more natural idea for black here would be to play knight to f6, trying to defend. But that does not help either because of white's reply pawn to e5. With that pawn push, the knight has nowhere safe to go, white will capture it soon, and black's position completely collapses. In the game, black tried bishop to e7 instead, but instead of capturing the knight immediately, white chose an even stronger move, queen to h5 with check. Now white takes advantage of the pin along the e-file. The knight cannot move because it is pinned, and black's king is forced to step back to f8. After that, white captures on f6. If black tries to recapture, it would be deadly. White can easily continue with a strong move like knight to d5, keeping the attack going, and black's position is lost. And if black tries to win the bishop, it does not change the outcome. In the game, black played bishop to d6, hoping at least to gain a tempo and create counterplay. But that did not help either. White calmly continued with queen to h6, giving check and heading straight for checkmate. After black moved the king to e8, white pushed pawn to f7. The king went to e7, and white finished the game with a beautiful checkmate, knight to d5. What really stands out in this line is how white plays so calmly, no matter what black tries. Whether black captures a knight or disrupts white's castling, white doesn't react emotionally, just keeps developing and suddenly delivers checkmate. Because of how dangerous these sharp lines are, many players choose to avoid the main variations of the King's Gambit altogether. Instead, they go for the King's Gambit declined. Black might simply defend the pawn with a move like pawn to d6 or knight to c6. In fact, knight to c6 is actually the second most common response by black in this position, offering a safer and less risky path. And then, you simply continue with knight to f3, renewing your threat to the central pawn. Black typically defends it, and now you play bishop to c4. This particular game we're analyzing was played by a strong black player with a rating of 2,400. But as you'll see, things went downhill quickly. After knight to f6, white responds with pawn to d3. At this point, many European players, in fact the majority, will play bishop to g4. At first glance, this move seems active and promising for black. However, it actually backfires. White calmly castles. Black plays bishop to a7, followed by knight to c3, all standard development moves. Now, this bishop on g4 never really becomes a problem. Why? Because white can always play pawn to h3, forcing an exchange that works in white's favor. Soon after, black often plays knight to d4, attempting to take advantage of the pin and start attacking. But this is where it all turns against them. White plays pawn, captures on e5, and after pawn recaptures comes a brilliant combination starting with bishop takes on f7. This isn't even a true sacrifice. After king captures on f7, white plays knight captures on e5, which is not only a check but also a fork, attacking the king and the bishop at the same time. When the king moves, white follows up with knight captures on g4, regaining the piece and completely exposing black's king. And guess what black usually does next? They play knight captures on g4, hoping to regain material with knight captures on c2, seemingly winning a pawn back. But this tactic fails instantly. White plays queen to a6, checkmate in 1. A beautiful finish.